You brought the water. Bless you. My throat feels like the inside of a paper bag left in the rain. Sit. I'll keep going. The light is good and the porch isn't complaining too loud yet. The left rail hums when the wind hits from the east. That hum is older than you and me both. Where was I? The storm with a girl's name coming, the crack I could trace with my pinky, the choice everyone loves to tell an old woman to make, like it's a recipe. Move, simplify, let go. Let go is easy to say when the thing you read dropping ice and tea, the thing that taught you how to hold on. I told you about the churchman who took God's money and called it God's will. Let me give that its bones. We were 5 grandmothers without patience for liars, and our hands knew how to add. The offering plates had started to come back light in a way that didn't match the months. Mrs. Paxton, who counts coins like a blackjack dealer, found gaps where gaps shouldn't be. Reverend Joel preached longer on forgiveness the Sunday after she asked to see the books. Put one hand on the Bible when he said stewardship, and I watched his thumb. It didn't rest. It tapped a liar's thumb. That's when I knew we'd have to follow him to wherever he was sending our money. We didn't wear red hats, not like a club, but we brought our hats out anyway, all of us, 'cause a hat makes a woman taller and braver in a town that likes its women quiet. We borrowed my neighbor Ray's station wagon, the one that rattled like it was rehearsing for the end times. We went to counties over to a revival he'd said he was guest preaching at. We found him in a motel that smelled like coin-operated air and men who tell themselves they read different. We didn't knock. We opened the door because Mrs. Paxton can open any door. He sat there with the ledger and a glass of something clear that wasn't water. Joel, I said, because a first name can be a leash. You been laundering God's laundry? He fussed with the collar around his neck, like the collar had choked him. He started with the words men start with. When they're caught, misunderstanding, complicated, attack. We didn't shout. We lined up the numbers like fence posts, one by one, straight. We'd brought copies with copies. We had dates and amounts and names of checks that had gone out to names that smelled like invention. We left paper everywhere, so he'd walk on his mess when he tried to leave. He tried to leave. He tripped. We didn't call the police first because this was church. And we knew how the men in blue like to shrug when women bring them sins with collars. We called the district board that employed him. We called the woman on that board who takes my pies for her father and knows the difference between cinnamon and ash. We told her to come with a man she trusted. She did. It took 6 hours and a pot of coffee we made on a hot plate. And by the end of it, the Reverend's hands were flat on the table, empty. Did it feel like revenge a little, but more like putting a fence around what matters? They took his job and his keys. They took back the money they could, and we told the church in a meeting where people cried and then sang anyway. Some folks said we had been cruel to a man who had lost his way. I said we kept him from taking yours. Lesson 9. Mercy without boundaries is just an invitation. Put a frame around your kindness. The night after the meeting, the porch glowed like it gets lit from inside. That's what happens when you've told the truth loud in town. The house seemed to breathe easier, like we'd taken a corset off. I sat on the step and felt my age as a weight and a crown. Ellie called to say she was proud. Jacob sent a text with a heart and then another, and I cherish that more than many speeches, because men who have been lost and found are careful with the words they say. Mia lay on her belly and drew stars she'd seen the night before. Insisting on the tales, insistent that each star needed a story. I didn't sleep. I listened. There was a sound in the house that hadn't been there before, like a clock someone remembered to wind. You think I'm making it into poetry, where there was only wood settling maybe? But my life leans on metaphor because it has to. The facts are heavy, honey. The facts will crush you if you don't tuck a ribbon under them. Days went by, I fixed the loose screw on the screen, and the tomatoes came in mean and sweet. Jacob brought over a bag of flour because he knows the way to apologize is through a biscuit. He sat with me while Mia told him about her science project and how glue is a liar if you don't wait. He smiled with the side of his mouth that used to look for trouble and now looks for work. He said, "Mom, I got an idea. Ideas from Jacob used to make my stomach tumble. This one landed soft. Porch raising, he said. Like a barn raising. We make a day of it. We feed people. We fix it together. Put a jar out for donations. Folks owe you, Mom. You've been their ledger and their broom and their memory. I don't want owing, I said. The word makes my teeth itch. He put his hand on the post, the way Matthew did before him. The wood didn't shift, it accepted him. Then call it a thank you. He shrugged. We're doing it. The flyer was his idea, but the girls at the school printed them on paper thick enough to feel like a promise. Porch raising, it said. Saturday, dawn to dusk. Bring a hammer if you have one. Bring your stories if you don't. No politics, no preaching, just boards and hands. I laughed when I read that last line. I didn't laugh long. The morning of, I watched the sunrise like a coin thrown into a red glass. They came, Lord. They came. Lord, they came. Men who'd borrowed my mower, women I'd driven to the doctor, boys I'd scared straight with a look, girls I'd fed cookies like medicine. Mrs. Paxton came with a ledger because she can't help herself, and I didn't stop her. Ellie came with a casserole the size of Alabama, and a husband who knows to keep his mouth closed when the women start measuring. The pastor who replaced Joel brought prayer, quiet and short, which is the only kind I tolerate in a heat wave. Jacob stood on the dirt with a pencil behind his ear and a level in his hand. And I saw Matthew in his stance. A man about to make would do what it should. We started by taking down what couldn't be saved. That part always hurts. People talk about building like it's the only noble act, but taking apart with respect is a skill that deserves a medal. We whispered before we pried, as if the boards might take offense. The first post went out like a tooth finally willing to give. The railing came off in my hands, and I kissed it. Don't laugh. It had held my babies from falling into a world that respects nothing. We stacked the salvageable boards to the left, where the hydrangea stoops, and burned the splintered ones later, careful and slow, like a funeral. Mia put her hands in the ash the next morning and said, "It's still warm." Some things are warm long after the fire leaves. At noon, the air wobbled with heat, and the men took off shirts they shouldn't have, and women fanned their faces with paper plates. We named each crossbeam as it went in, because naming is the first magic humans ever learned. This one's Margaret, someone said, for my mother, who had held more than her share. This one's the baby's blanket. This one's the rain lesson we wrote the names in. Pencil, where only the mice and God will read them. Jacob measured twice, 3 times. He let a boy who needed to feel like a man swing the hammer and taught him how not to miss. He told Mia to stand back and then pulled her forward to put one nail in just one so she would know the weight of a beginning. People came with money in envelopes and tried to be sneaky about it. Mrs. Paxton was not sneaky. She was the jar. She held it up and said, "You put your thank you in, you hear? Pennies count." I stood beside the jar and felt my face do a thing I hadn't allowed in a while. Softened. I'd been braced so long that a day of hands in the right place, of words held instead of thrown, undid the knot I carry under my ribs. We used Matthew's plan. Did I tell you we found it? I should have started there. 2 nights before the raising, I couldn't sleep, because night often thinks I owe it interest. I went to the drawer where I keep the things too important to leave unattended and too sad to look at daily. The button from Jacob's first jacket, the ribbon from Ellie's hair the night she rescued a bird, the note my father wrote my mother the day after I was born. She loud. I love her. Tucked behind that was the napkin with Matthew's drawing in faint pencil, the lines smudged from 20 years of second thoughts. He had traced the post spacing, the stairs steeper than code because we don't always obey law when our knees remember more. I pressed the napkin flat with the palm of my hand. Felt like a blessing in a dare. Jacob cried when I showed him. He tried not to, because a foreman doesn't leak in front of his crew. He failed. Good. He took the measurements down onto real paper and then onto lumber with his pencil and then into the ground with his shovel. I watched a ghost stand over his shoulder and nod. I don't think I'm crazy, or maybe I do, but the useful kind. I should tell you about the brooch now because stories like trinkets sometimes find their way back. I sold Mama's last good brooch for Jacob's stitches, and I have never once regretted it and still felt the absence of that small weight like a lost tooth you keep probing with your tongue. A woman I didn't know came at noon with lemonade so tart it could via cut glass. She looked at my blouse like she expected it to be waiting. Then she said, "I think this is yours," and put the brooch in my palm. It's the same curve of gold like a comma, the tiny missing stone like a story missing a word. My mother had it, she said. Told me she'd traded it for rent, and it passed and passed. She died last spring, and I cleaned her drawers and found a note pinned to it. For the woman with the porch, it said, "Took me a minute to understand. I put the brooch on and felt 20 years return to my chest. Not my body, my backbone. The pin sat there like a period I'd needed." We finished before the sun went down. That sentence looks like a miracle even now, but it was just sweat and measuring and the kind of stubborn that loves outcomes. The last board went in with Mia's hand holding the nail while Jacob guided her fingers, and I prayed without words. We sanded the rail until the grain felt like a river map. We wiped the dust off with old t-shirts that had known every summer since 1980. We oiled what needed oil and stepped back like painters do, at the end, pretending surprise at what the hands have wrought even when the heart had held it for years. The porch was new, not young new. Young is foolish. New is respectful. It's shown even without stain, even with the pencil names on its bones. I took the napkin and slid it under the first step with Matthew's initials and the date written on the back in my paradoxical grandmother's script. Shaky, certain. People clapped. I didn't want them to. I wanted quiet because the porch and I needed a first moment alone. But life rarely gives you perfect timing, only decent chances. I hugged who I could reach. I told everyone to go home and wash, to pour cold water over their wrists, to stand in a kitchen quiet enough to hear a refrigerator hum. I looked at the jar with its money like a solved riddle. We counted it and paid for the lumber, and there was enough left to fix the gutter and buy Mia a pair of shoes that didn't hurt her heel. Mercy answers like that sometimes, exact and then a little extra. We slept like the tired sleep that isn't peace but its cousin. The storm came the next afternoon because stories don't wait for convenient weather. The radio spoke in a calm voice about bands and pressure. The sky went the color of a bruise again, because weather loves to repeat its best lines. The wind started with manners and then forgot them. I looked at the porch and wanted to order it inside. I moved the chairs, tied the swing, took down the wind chime that had been my father's and often announces trouble late. Ellie called and said, "Mom, go to the shelter." I said, "My shelter's on posts." She said, "I'm coming." The line went dead. Mia stood at the window with a face as serious as a verdict. "Are we going to be okay?" She asked as if I could sign the paper the sky would obey. "We will," I said, because love makes you a liar and a prophet both. Even if we get wet, when the worst of it hit mean. The oak in the yard danced the way old men dance at weddings when their knees forget their age. The rain came in a sheet with ribs. The wind wrapped its arm around the house and tried to take it to the dance floor. The new porch moved. New was flexible. It gave where the old would have cracked, and I loved it for that. The railing groaned. The steps took the water like a better swimmer. We watched a trash can think about flying and then decide this was not the day. Then the neighbor's dog got loose, of course. He de-danned, skid across the yard like a bar of soap. Mia screamed. The dog slammed into the bottom step and howled. Without thinking, I opened the door. The wind pushed back, wanting to make us part of its sentence. I leaned forward with the weight of every decade hanging from my shoulders like hand weights. Mia clung to my skirt and then let go because she knew the difference between saving and being saved. I stepped onto the porch and the porch took me. I made it to the top of the steps and leaned down, my stomach touching my thighs, and grabbed the dog by the collar. He squirmed like a bad idea and then settled into the pole. We backed up, one step, two, the wind polite, then rude, then apologizing by tugging harder. The last step, the dog's nails scrambled. My heels slipped. The porch said, "I've got you." And it did, until it didn't, because the part of the step we hadn't secured in the back human error. Not divine, pulled just an inch. The inch is where accidents live. The wood scraped my calf. I slipped down to one knee and felt the bad elastic of old ligaments trying to be young on demand. I grunted so my granddaughter wouldn't have to hear me cry. Jacob's truck appeared in the curtain of rain like a hope with bad timing. He ran like men run when they've seen enough ambulances in their lives and hate the sound. He got to me, all hands in habit, took the dog, took Mia, took my elbow, took the story out of danger. We went inside. The wind went on. It always does, whether you're watching or not. We sat in the kitchen with towels, like flags. My leg bled in a line that looked like a river on a map. Mia put her finger near it like she might trace the route and learn geography that way. Ellie burst in, wet hair glued to her cheeks. Her face flushed with the fear she didn't scold me for causing. Because she had learned that scolding is a luxury you can afford while the roof is thinking. We waited. The waiting was louder than the storm. Then the world settled. Storms do that, they rant. They leave. When we stepped out, the porch was still there. The step that had betrayed me looked abashed. The rail that had groaned stood with its head held high like a soldier after the flag goes down. The paint a metaphor. The stain we hadn't even put on yet would have to wait. Mia put her hand on the post and said, "Good job." I said it too would, to Jacob. To the tilt of the house that had chosen not to fall. We ate soup that night like it was a spell. We slept in rooms that smelled like damp gratitude. In the morning, the sun came up ordinary, the best kind of miracle. I went out with my coffee and put my feet on the new boards and felt something under the arch. I bent and found where Jacob had left a nail head proud. I hammered it in with the bottom of my mug, which isn't how you're supposed to do it. And Matthew laughed in my head at the same time my mother said, "Whatever works. Listen. I am wandering because I don't want to get to the part that hurts clean. But you asked for tragedies, sacrifices, revenge, and lessons. And we're not leaving one out now that the porch can carry all of them." 2 weeks after the storm, Jacob didn't show up for the gutter job he'd promised to finish. His boss called me, polite and worried. I know the taste of worry and the way it sits in your mouth even if you brush your teeth 3 times. We went looking, Ellie and I, and we found him behind the Quick Mart, sitting on the curb, hands shaking, eyes clear and full of water that didn't spill. It was a stupid fight with himself that he'd lost just a round of the pill bottle was plastic and ordinary and the kind of evil that hides in plain sight. He held it out to me like a man handing over the gun he bought with his mouth and not his mind. "I messed up," he said, a sentence like a bloodletting. I thought I could. I thought. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I sat on the curb. I have sat on a lot of curbs in my life. They are the porches of people who can't afford porches. I took his hand and I said, "Okay," not because it was okay, because the only word that lets a man stand up sometimes is okay. So we start again. "I can't keep making you start again," he said. "Not fair." "Fair?" I said, and laughed in a way that scared a bird. Fair left town in 41. We do what we do. Lesson 10. There are restarts until there aren't. You don't get to know which one is the last. Love like this one is the last. It might be. That way, if it isn't, you haven't wasted a single drop on the thought of saving some for later. He came home with us. We made coffee. He put his head on my lap like he was 8, which offended him and then soothed him, because men are boys and boys are men and mothers are always both a pillow and a wall. He slept. He woke. 'Kay? He called his sponsor with a voice that knew how to ask. 'Kay? He went back to meetings in a church basement that smelled like donuts and ash. 'Kay? And he sat in chairs with other men who had learned how to say their names like apologies and declarations, both. He came to the porch every night after, sat on the top step, counted the boards like prayer beads. I watched his lips move. He was naming them Margaret, baby's blanket, rain lesson. The names held him where the pills had lied. I had my own confession to make, and old women are not exempt from the work. One morning while he was counting, and Mia was drawing, and Ellie was on my couch reading a book that made her cry and then laugh, I told him about the lug nuts. Said it fast, like ripping a bandage, then slow, like winding a clock. They were quiet for a while, the kind of quiet that isn't judgment but calibration. Everyone adjusting their picture of you to include a shadow they hadn't seen. Ellie spoke first. "Mama," she said, "you could have killed him." She didn't say it cruel. She said it like a fact you have to set on the table before the other facts can sit down. I nodded. I know. The knowing hadn't saved me from doing it. Jacob put his hand on my knee. His hand is an apology and to shelter both. "You did a bad thing because a bad thing happened to you," he said. "Doesn't make it right. Makes it human." He looked at me with a love that made my eyes water like onions and mercy. "Do you want to fix it?" he asked. I wanted to say no. I want to live with my guilt like a pet that bites. But I didn't. I said, "How?" "Write him," Ellie said. "Or his wife. Or his daughter if he has one. Tell the truth. Ask for forgiveness, even if you don't get it. That's the part that's yours. Children can be wise when you've raised them on wood and wind." I wrote. The pen felt heavy. I told the story plain. I didn't make excuses. I asked for nothing. I mailed it. I waited. I don't know what I expected to feel. Lighter, hollow. The letter went like all the letters in my life, with the postal worker who knows my birthdays and my moods. I went home and pressed my palm to the porch post, which is my way of remembering I belong to something built. 2 weeks later, a woman came up the walk. She was the kind of pretty that lives in the eyes and sticks around when the world is cruel. She asked if she could sit. "Please," I said, and moved to the edge of the step. She told me she knew the story, but not from my letter. "He told me," she said, "not right away. Years ago, he knew you'd been the one. He saw your car. He saw you put the wrench back in your bag." My stomach fell through the floor into the cool under the house where the porch keeps its secrets. She laughed at my face. "He said he deserved worse," she went on. "He said you took the speed out of him. He said it saved his life later. When he wanted to outrun the grief, you know he caused your sister." She swallowed. "He was a sober man when he died," she said. "He told me to find you if I could and tell you he forgave you even though you hadn't asked yet." I cried like my bones were leaking. She put her hand over mine on the post. "I'm not here to make you feel better," she said, which is the kindest sentence a person can offer when forgiveness is in the room. "I'm here to tell you the truth, because women like us live in rooms where men's truths echo too long." Lesson 11. Confession is a key. It doesn't always open the door, you thought. It opens a better one. We sat there until the sun moved to the right place. She told me her name, and I remember it. And I will never say it because it is hers and the porchess and not for the street. She left, and the air felt precise. Mia came out with a sandwich and a question about insects. Life reasserts. The porch learned my new shape. That's a sentence I didn't know I needed to write until I heard it. Our bodies change and build new architectures under our skin. Pain takes up residence, moves out, leaves a shelf crooked. The porch is my mirror. When I stoop, it asks me why. When I straighten, it praises me with quiet. Then came the day of the recording. This day, I told you at the start that people get a handful of chances to say a life out loud, and the smart ones don't spend them on gossip. You asked me for revenge and sacrifices and lessons and tragedy, and I've handed them over like biscuits across a table. There's one thing left that isn't any of those, or it is all of them tucked together under a quilt. I don't want to die a dramatic death. I don't have the energy for it, and I'm not applying for sainthood. But I want to die on this porch, not the way you think, no falling, no gasps that make women throw aprons and men drop cords. I want to die because life finally said, "Thank you, that's enough." And I said, "You're welcome." And I was sitting where the boards know my name. I told this to Ellie last week. She said, "Don't be morbid." I said, I'm being specific. Specificity is a kind of prayer. She rolled her eyes in a way that told me she de-heard me and wouldn't tell me I de-scared her. Jacob said, when it's time, we'll carry you out in the rocker, and we laugh the way you laugh at a joke that touches the brass handle of a door you all see. Mia drew me with a crown of nails and a cloak of blueprints. She gave the porch eyes. She's not wrong. You ask for the ending, the best emotional ending. Best is a greedy word. Emotional is the only way out. Endings aren't neat. They fray. But I'll tell you the moment I knew my backbone had been poured with something stronger than the average woman gets. And you can decide if that is the end you wanted. It was a morning that smelled like a new apple. The porch still held the dust of yesterday's talk. Ellie came early, which meant she had a thing she needed to put down. She had a letter in her hand with the messy seal of a courthouse. There was a property dispute over a line we'd always respected by habit. The man next door, the new one, not the old who had given me zucchini like apologies, said our porch extended 6 inches into what the paper called his right. 6 inches. A man will fight to own 6 inches the same way he will brag about 6 inches. I sipped my coffee slow. We could move the steps, Ellie said, because she is practical to her bones. We could cut the rail and shift the base. I looked at the step. I looked at the rail. I felt Matthew's smudge an inch under my toe and my father's whistle and my mother's hand on my shoulder like a weight that helped me stand in Jacob's pencil. And Mia's nail and the town's hands and the jar's coins and my mistake and my fix and every time the porch had taken a weight meant for me. I set down my coffee. No, I said. We went to court because sometimes you leave the porch to defend it. The judge was a woman with hair like the tail of a storm and a patience I recognized. The man next door had bought the land without purchasing any stories. He stood there with his lawyer and pointed at a map that didn't have our names on it. I stood there with my hat on because I'm taller in hats, and I told her about posts that had saved children and community that had held each board. I told her about napkins and nails and names. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I said he wants 6 inches of wood. He can have 6 inches of my back instead, if that will get him through the night. He can have the part that sleeps and not the part that wakes. He will not have this porch. She asked a question smart judges ask. How long has the structure existed in this footprint? Since 1960, I said. New boards, I added. Old bones. She nodded. She stamped something. The law likes stamps for the same reason toddlers do. Easement of necessity, she said, and other words that mean history trumps a scale when the history is heavy enough. The porch stays. The man made a face like a boy at nap time. He left. I went home. I put my hand on the post and I could feel every touch it had stored, like a library keeps breath. I thought my back would break from relief. It didn't. It straightened. The room inside my chest that has always kept a clean corner for fear got a window. That night, we ate on the porch. Ellie made the red beans like her grandmother. And Jacob cut the tomatoes in a way that would have made his father proud if cutting tomatoes is a thing that makes a man proud and, why not? Pride is in the small skills too. Mia read a poem she'd written called Boards, and it didn't rhyme in the places I expected, which is what love should do. The air cooled. The cicadas pushed their old music out of the trees. I felt tired in a particular way, the way the day before a long trip makes you tired. When your body already knows the miles, even if your mind is still packing. I looked at the porch swing, and it looked back. I sat in the rocker instead. The wood under me gave the tiniest protest, then said fine. I held Mia's hand. I thought about the woman with the lug nuts, and the woman with the ledger, and the woman with the napkin, and the woman with the brooch. I forgave her, all of them. I felt their hands on my hands. My breath came easy, like a child's. I heard a whistle, just once, just the one note. It came from nowhere and everywhere and from under the step where Matthew's initials live. I didn't turn my head fast. I learned a long time ago not to startle the holy with your eagerness. I smiled like a secret got told. Ellie touched my knee. Mama, she said like a girl. I'm here, I said. I'm right here. That's all a porch ever wanted from a woman. Presence. That's all a daughter ever needed from a mother. The kindness of being met. I closed my eyes for a minute to taste that particular shade of twilight. When I opened them, the moon had come up, and Mia was sleeping, her hands still in mine, which told me that even dreaming, she trusts me to stay. The ending you asked for I send to me falling quiet right now and leaving you with a tidy speech. I won't do that to you. I am not done yet. But the ending you can put in your pocket is this. The porch broke. Like all good things break if they live long enough and do enough saving. My backbone grew not in spite of it, but because of it. I am less wood than I was, more bone. I am the rail that groaned and didn't snap. I am the step that gave and got fixed. I am the post you can lean against when the wind calls you by the wrong name. Someday soon, if the numbers of my days add up and subtract right, I will go the way my father went, and my mother went, and the boy who became your grandfather went, and my sister went. I will leave this porch to you, to Mia, to the next pair of hands that can tell the difference between a hammer used to hurt and a hammer used to hold. Under the first step is a napkin with a smudge, and on the underside of the rail is a row of names written in pencil. On the third plank from the left, near the place where the sun warms at first, is the brooch pin, flattened, hammered in. Because I didn't want to lose it again. If you ever run your fingers there, you'll feel its bump. That is the part of me that metal remembers. Lesson 12. Because you liked the numbers, make beauty where you have been broken. Lesson 13. Your revenge will not save you. Your forgiveness might. Lesson 14. Build porches. If you can't build a chair on a patch of dirt, put it where the wind can find you. Sit. Listen. Tell the truth to the person who holds the recorder. Don't step on the right front beam if it doesn't want you. Teach the children where the boards creak. Teach them to love things that hold. You can stop the recorder now, honey. Not because the story is over. It's because it is yours now too. And stories get heavy if one person carries them alone. If tomorrow the porch hums and tells me the wind is bringing news, I'll be here to hear it. And if the day after that my breath decides it's done with the counting, know that I did not go ashamed. I went sitting up straight, my hand on the post, the moon like a silver dollar rolling across the sky, and the sound of my granddaughter sleeping trust into my palm. A broken porch. It's a stronger backbone. That's the ending. That's the gift. Take it. Build something.